levels of income are better off than they were in 1979. But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That is a liberal policy. Yes, it came out, he didn't intend it to, but he did.
We fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. This is a comment on the Federal Liberal Communist budget. This is the budget designed to buy off Canadians to vote away their freedoms even more. But they just don't know it. Canada has just had another budget. But for who? We should be asking. But for who? First of all, with no warning to the opposition, actually trying to sneak it past Parliament without any opposition comments. Many MPs were caught out. That's how devious this government is. And I challenge anybody to find any reference to that on social media, because it's been wiped. On top of that, I challenge anyone to find any reference to the fact that this was if not an illegal act, certainly an unparliamentary one. But I guess we shouldn't be surprised from a government that ignores laws it doesn't like and bypasses our constitution without even a whimper from the official opposition party. So, business as usual. No, this piece will be quite short compared with all the other ones I've done recently. Well, why, you might ask? Well, first of all, there are so many pundits out there commenting on how good the budget was and how excellent it's going to be for Canadians in the future. Here's the problem for me. Yes, I do have a problem. And I have to decode this for my American friends who, in the unlikely event, follow Canadian politics, are unlikely to know anything about the infrastructure of Canada. Amazingly enough, Canada does have some large cities. It's a bit of a shock, but there you are. We do. Our biggest city is not the capital city, which is Ottawa, which I don't even think most Americans have even heard of. And I doubt whether many of them could even find it on a map. That's if they use them anymore. Now, our biggest city is Toronto. I'm sure they've heard of that because of the hockey, which of course, on the Canadian side of the border, sticks in the craw of Quebecans, by the way, who think it should be them. So they must have some money to make up for it, to make it fair. Oh, sorry, was that my inside voice? Sorry. This city is quite frankly a sprawling mess. And I know that's not going to be popular, but I don't really care. Expanding all the time. Why? Well, because it can. It is the epicenter of a mass invasion that appears to have been going on for decades. The city, shall we say, has changed. Now, because I live in one of those Western countries where you can't comment on that openly, and I will give you another example in a day or two, that's all I can say on the matter, other than think Rotherham, England. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. Think Rotherham, England on steroids, and you might just get some idea of what I'm saying. But I'm not saying it, of course. I'm just suggesting that you look at Rotherham, England. Anyway, back to the comment. I digress. Toronto lives on new money being brought into the country every year. It's a bit like London, England. If you look at the UK and look at London from the air, there's a ring road around it. It's almost like a medieval moat. Inside the moat is a totally different world from the rest of the country. Toronto is the same. So the reason I describe Toronto in such detail is that most, and I mean most, of the financial media pundits live, work and operate in that financial bubble. They have little or no knowledge about the rest of this vast country. Nor, I'd hazard a guess, for the most part, do they care, and they certainly don't show much interest in it. That is why they have no clue at all how the rest of the country is doing. I will give you another example. Outside the bustling metropolis of Toronto is rural Ontario, which is vast, bigger than Texas, where schools are in a terrible condition, hospitals are in dire need of upgrades, many areas are short of doctors, the state of the roads are collapsing in many places, from many years of make do and mend. Quite honestly, the general infrastructure of the province that I know is pitiful, and yet more and more money is poured into what many Ontarians believe is a black hole known as Toronto. More and more, shall we say, people pour into our country from countries with, shall we say, less than stellar health, and they are foisted upon this city by our socialist government and previous ones, causing a massive load on all Ontarians having to bear that additional cost, not to mention the additional strain to the infrastructure. Canada, on the surface, looks a lot like America in its construction. I've always said that. But I can always tell when I'm watching a movie where it was filmed. I don't need to see the end credits to know. When I cross from southern Ontario into northern New York, the conditions of the roads improve dramatically, and so does the infrastructure. The technology, suddenly the GPS springs into action, almost like it's got a new lease on life. Even in the most rural areas in Canada, where large areas of the countryside don't even register any detail, in the US, all the information comes to life. Only that is the case in our large cities in Canada. I often make a joke about it. Oh look, a drain when we cross into the States. Look, we can see where we're going at night, luminous markings on the road. Because we don't have drains in my part of the world, the water will just clear on its own magically, won't it? And we don't need to see the road markings at night, do we? This all goes to my point. It may be petty, but it's the root of the problem here in Canada. They will not spend the money on the infrastructure because the country is at its heart corrupt. Millions of dollars disappear every year and it's never found where it goes. Never. More and more money is spent in the metropolis of Toronto every year, while the rest of the province is left with scraps from the table. So going back to my original subject, these so-called experts, shall we say the economy is good because they are living, working and operating in the metropolis of Toronto. They think they have great employment. Standards are good, everything's hunky-dory. Think Toronto, think Vancouver, think Montreal, and most of all, think Ottawa. And when you think Ottawa, think of Washington DC, and think how inflated everything is in Washington DC because of the federal government. Well, that's what Ottawa's like. But the rest of the country has to bear the brunt of these socialist programs, because whilst I can't speak for the rest of Canada, I know for a fact in the biggest province in the country, bigger than Texas as I said before, that Canadians are not doing well and the economy is not booming and we cannot stand any tax increases. None. Zero. Zilch. Nada. There are no jobs. Shops and businesses are closing at a faster rate than ever before due to high energy prices, regulations and government taxes. Now I'm sure my American friends are familiar with that. No, it's more important to have hate laws, gender equality, and make up crazy ideas about humans that existed from the very beginning of time than look after your citizens. Why? Because they care nothing for Canada. I've said this before and I'll keep hammering away at it. Liberals don't care about Canadians. All Liberals care about are large urban voting blocks. And screw Canadians who choose a better life elsewhere. They're of no electoral interest to them at all. So when they start talking about electric cars are the future, think about the people who have large distances to cover every day. For people in my area, 50 miles is nothing. For me personally, it takes 20 miles to get to the nearest town. We pay double for almost everything the average American does. We don't get pizza delivered to the door. We have to get in our cars, God forbid, to get everything. So we certainly don't want Trudeau's carbon dioxide fake tax that satisfies no one except those tree huggers in Toronto, Ottawa, Quebec, etc., who all use, oh yes, of course they do, public transport. What public transport? We don't have public transport. And yes, you're right, you could move into one of those urban boxes. But why should we? Why should we change our lifestyles to suit them? Because I, like many Canadians, who think their taxes should be spent in their area, not to prop up urban jungles that most Canadians neither want or need. These areas have been created by years of social engineering by socialists in Ottawa, who only see their next voting bloc. That's all they see. So when you hear their so-called experts in Ottawa and Toronto saying the economy is doing good, maybe someone should tell them this. We do know what's going on out here. It's now the 21st century. We do have cars, we have phones, and we have the internet. We don't have to rely on your lies anymore. And we know our neighbour to the south is doing way better than us because their taxes are lower. So when we are doing better, better than whom? And who is doing better? Because Canadians aren't, but urban Canadians are. So ask yourself, I wonder why that is. And then ask yourself this question. When they say taxes need to go up, for who and why? And I think you've answered your own question right there. It's way past time these urban do-gooders fix their own self-inflicted problems and stop blaming the rest of the country. If you want your electric cars and no plastic bags and you want to pay 10 times the amount more for electricity, go right ahead. Knock yourself out. We want nothing to do with it. Long live the truck and long live freedom. You know, the best thing about a road is that it has a start and a finish, and you can start somewhere and end up somewhere else entirely. A budget for who? You or me? And that's my comment. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab and email. We're also on Spotify. Just go to the podcast section and type Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass on these links. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com under A Radio. That's EHRADIO, A Radio, and click on the like button. And you can hear a review of our morning moments on WHBJ-DB, News Talk Radio on Spreaker.com. Join us and many others. And you can find all our podcasts and morning moments at aradio.wordpress.com. Click on the Morning Moments tab.